Smile 2 releases 2 years after the first, and with viral marketing and overall eerie concept and pretty unpredicted success, I've always been interested in a sequel, but to be honest, the trailers for this movie have me pretty uninterested. The first grossed over $200 million in the box office off of a $17 million budget, and I was kind of hoping it would be one of those small original one-hit wonders and let's move on, but the concept of a sequel was enticing. With Naomi Scott in the lead and a direct story continuation from the first film, the trailer and marketing problems aside, there was inherent intrigue, and I've seen Smile 2, and it's just as crazy, wild, and bonkers as you'd expect a Smile sequel to be. Before we get into over 98% of you guys who watch these videos aren't yet subscribed, so if you don't want to miss out on more reviews, hit that button, but don't waste any more time, let's get into it. Taking place 6 days after the first film, Smile 2 continues the tale of the parasite as it enters the body of Sky Riley, and she's overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and pressures of fame. She faces her dark past and tries to regain control of her own life. For starters, this movie just wasn't really scary to me. I found the first movie to be effective in pretty much all of its scare tactics, but this time around, the whole like smiling person thing kind of got mind-numbing to me. The first film has one amazing jump scare. The second film has one amazing jump scare as well, but the rest of the scares and the overall tension that's being built, it kind of felt repeated from the first movie, so it didn't work nearly as well for me. I will say there was one guy right behind me that screamed the loudest I've ever heard in a movie theater at one of the jump scares in this film, so take that as you will. But generally, I do get scared very easily in films. This one just didn't really do it for me for the most part. But aside from just the whole like smiling and being eerie tactic of the film, I think that the physical use of horror was pretty great in regards to at least attempting to build tension in a way that we haven't really seen before in modern horror films. Because this physical use of horror, without giving any spoilers away, uses a lot of hallucination techniques, and I really enjoyed that because that's what this demon is. That's what makes it different than a bunch of other horror movies. These hallucination-based things come into play in the second act, and they lead to some great twists and turns, especially in the very final act where you don't know what's real. You don't know what's happening and what's not happening, and then by the very final seconds of this film, you still don't know what to trust. And on an eerie suspense, just on a level of this being a thriller, it really is effective in the final moments. But I will say, these elements do feel a little bit shoehorned in going into the third act. They kind of feel like a plot device that needs to be there to speed all of this up. And at the same time, I still do think there are way too many pacing issues in terms of this movie just taking way too much time, but I'll talk about that later. Before getting into more of the story elements, I have to talk about the lead performance here from Naomi Scott. In the second half of this film, she is nearly perfect, but the only reason I say second half is because the first half I just really wasn't on board. I also don't really think she had that much to work with, and then there is a little bit of a cycle, which I'll get into more in just a second here, of her going through these repeated measures of the smile demon kind of showing us her trauma, and it just feels very repetitive. Like these scenes are happening over and over, but we're not learning anything new about her character, so Naomi Scott can't really give us anything more on an acting level. But that final act, it just, horror aside, on a thriller level, it gets so depressing and scary because you don't really know what's gonna go on. You don't, and the things you see might not even be true. So on that level, Naomi Scott just truly delivers an amazing performance and really gets across this fear of not knowing what's happening to the audience. And circling back to what I had said earlier about this repetitive nature of just all of the shit that's going on in the mind of the person that's tortured by this demon, a lot of it is just super repetitive, like the second act of that first film. And there was a sliver of new information kind of dating us back to the first film, and then obviously a little bit before that as well. We obviously see the transition between the first film and the second film in the opening of this one, and we get a lot more about this outer worldly figure. But then we kind of go back to just focusing on this repetitive trauma. And I wish that we had dialed into more of the world building aspect of it, because we were already interested in this new protagonist. I didn't really need to keep repeating the trauma. This film's protagonist is also thematically way different than the first film's protagonist, but I feel like we did not explore that nearly enough. I think the exploration that we did get on a thematic level of Sky Riley was interesting enough. It did carry enough weight in this film This movie really dives into like the celebrity's life and then pairs that with substance abuse because of Sky Riley's past. It's combined really, really well with this plot, and it makes something that we've already seen in the first movie at least a little bit more unique, so it's not a complete repetition of what we've seen before. Getting close and personable to a celebrity in this situation and seeing all these different things happen to them and the people around them inherently creates a very interesting film. So I don't think the problem that a lot of people were going into this movie with, oh, it's just going to be repetitive, it's kind of going to be just the first movie but in a different situation. It's in a different enough situation and different enough thematic idea and exploration that it does really work for me. And the final thing I want to talk about is how this movie is technically pretty damn awesome. I wouldn't say it's perfect by any means. This is the director's second movie after directing the first Smile film, but he does make some really great moves behind the camera. And honestly, if you're not even going to watch this movie for the horror of it, as a horror fan, I think this does some great things on a technical level. And just sound overall carries a lot of weight in this film, especially in the final, like, peaking, concluding moment of this film. There's a lot where you just rely on the technical elements for everything to actually hit, for everything to click and wrap up really well, and it worked perfectly to me. In a world where Hollywood is just making way too many sequels, Smile 2 wasn't on my radar for actually being great, but it really did surprise me, and I do want a Smile 3. If you like the first film, I 110% recommend checking out the second film. Overall, I'm going to give Smile 2 a 7.5 out of 10. If you've seen it or want to check it out, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.